All right, thank you for tuning in. Today, we're going to talk about how to build wealth and passive income from investing in short-term rentals. So I've asked Tim Hubbard. Tim is a real estate investor. He has a couple of companies operating. He's a director of operations for Midtown Stays and for Rest Methods. I believe you're the owner of that, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So how did you get started in short-term rentals?
Well, I started investing in real estate, and it can be like sort of a longer path, and I got into real estate to be able to travel because I really like
Right.
traveling. So I was staying in lots of short-term rentals. And I remember I was looking for new markets to invest in, and I was staying in a short-term rental, looking for long-term rentals. And then it just kind of like dawned on me. I looked up the price of the property I was staying in and how
Yeah.
much I was paying per night. And it just like light bulb went off. I'm like, wow, these returns are way better than these long-term rentals I'm looking at. So it
Right.
just kind of clicked. And then I started focusing on properties that worked well as short-term rentals.
Okay. Now tell us your investment method. I mean, what exactly do you look for, and how did you make your first acquisition?
So I look for a lot of the same fundamentals I would look for a traditional long-term rental. So a
Okay.
market that's landlord friendly, low cost of living, hopefully population's growing, has diverse employment. It's usually not the kind of hot markets, So I'm looking for markets that just have good cash flow and that work as long-term rentals, but that also happen to be properties that could work well as short-term rentals. So I usually buy all my properties as long-term rentals, and then I
Okay.
convert them over to a short-term rental. But I always have that as a backup plan. If regulations change or something changed, it's going to be in a spot where I can still go back and rent as a long-term rental.
Yeah. If your city starts getting, shutting down, say no more Airbnb or VRBO, you
Yeah.
can have a backup plan. How do you, obviously, if you're doing Airbnb or VRBO, you want to have it close to event space. Do you target on event space, lakes? Or the ocean? What do you focus on?
So I guess I like to be in a city so most of my rentals are more urban type. They're
Okay.
not like the traditional vacation rental you would think of next to a lake or next to the ocean, although those can work really well too. But I found that the properties that I've acquired, not really in super dense urban areas, but kind of like in midtown areas where they are close to entertainment, they are close to events, but they also happen to be like in a city where we're still getting business travel, So
Okay.
I've got two demographics I'm going at: people that are visiting the city, visiting family, there for tourism or events, but then also people that are there for work.
Okay. Are the ones that, I mean, do you target markets that don't have a lot of Airbnbs, or do you really, and I got to quit saying Airbnbs, short-term rentals.
Yeah,
I just get,
that's
it's like Uber anymore. Yeah, I need to get an Uber, even though you meant any of the other brands.
right, exactly.
Do you target markets that have a good number of them in place already? Or do you like to go in and kind of be the first to the market in a certain area?
So I'm looking, before I'm looking at the short-term rentals. Yeah, I'm just looking to make sure I found a good property,
Okay.
that's working as a long-term rental. And then I'm going to look at all the Airbnb type statistics. There's some
Right.
really
Yeah.
good tools that we have available for that now. But I wouldn't say I let the amount of Airbnbs in an area intimidate me from investing in that area, because I
Right.
think the demand for them is going to continue to keep growing. Of course, if you're in an area that has a limited amount of permits, then I would be more concerned
Sure. Yeah.
with the amount of rentals. But the cities that I'm in, there is no restriction on the amount of rentals. And because they're a big enough city, I think that demand is just going to keep growing in those areas.
Okay. And you don't have to, I mean, parking really, I guess if you're going for long term, if you can have a backup to long term, yes, you do have to worry about parking, correct? So
Mhm.
how about the breakdown of the units? Do you have in the properties that you look for, do you typically look for 1 and 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms? Can you kind of walk us through what you look for in your properties?
Yeah, good question. And I've experimented with lots of different properties too. And kind of found what I like best now.
That's
But
why you want you on the show, so you can keep everybody else from making those same mistakes.
yeah. So I usually invest in small multifamily properties. So
Okay.
2, 3, 4, up to like 12 unit properties.
Okay.
And I like to have smaller units because I
Okay.
found with the smaller units, for one, that they cost less to furnish. The overhead, like the expenses and the cleaning, is usually a little lower. There's less chance of parties a lot of times,
Oh,
because
yeah.
if it's only for 2 people, then that they're not going to bring in 10 people and try to get away with it.
Right.
But I think the thing that I most like about smaller units is that they attract longer stays. So people coming in for work, or people exploring a new city, maybe they want to move there, and people are working virtually now, so that the length of stays are going up. But I found that they get longer stays and they get more repeat guests, and they're a little easier to operate. So I might have a multifamily property that has a mixed use. Like I have some buildings that have larger units, like 2, 3 bedroom units, that I keep as long-term rentals. And then the smaller units I've turned into short-term rentals.
Okay.
So
What is it when you say the average stay is extended? What are those about? What are you seeing? How is that increasing? And is it because of COVID, the pandemic?
I think partially, yeah.
Okay.
It definitely, the length of stay, and Airbnb has this in their stats too. The length of stay has definitely gone up since COVID.
Okay.
People, they don't have to a lot of people don't have to return to an office on Monday,
Yeah.
so they can go and they can stay longer and they can work remotely. Before the pandemic, my average stay was like a little less than 3 nights.
Okay.
And I would say it's probably gone up like 25%, at least, the average
Okay.
stay. And then we have lots of people that are staying, for months and months at a time. So,
Okay. You focus, so you want to have, you don't have restaurants in any of your buildings, do you?
there is actually a property that I'm leasing. So most all my properties I own, but if someone's sort of been investigating short-term rentals as an option, they might have heard of lease arbitrage,
Yeah.
which is where someone leases a property with the landlord's permission and they sublease it. Last year, or I guess that was this year, a investor came to me who had a property with 10 units, and his restaurant, he's a restaurant guy, he had a restaurant below, and he didn't want to mess with the apartments. So I leased all those apartments from him, and it's been working really well. And it's nice having the restaurant in the property. Yeah.
Oh, I
A
can
lot of the
imagine.
guests. Yeah. A lot of the
Yeah,
guests.
because it would drive business to the restaurant that's down below.
Yeah.
Some people don't want to go down and sit in a restaurant. They want to have it brought up to their room. Can work out well. I'm very curious, Tim, is, obviously, I don't know, you came up with the idea for this. You bought your first property. How did you manage it? Did you do all the self-management? Did you go in and do all the cleaning? How did you get started?
So I had this property. It was a fourplex, and it was downtown. This was in Sacramento when I was still living in California, and I was living in the suburbs at the time, and I was renovating it. I wanted to live downtown. So it's like, you know what, I'm gonna furnish this unit because I want to live down there anyways, and I'm gonna put it up on Airbnb, see what happens. If it doesn't work out, I'm just gonna move in there. But of course, it worked out really well, and it's been rented, nonstop since. So I started with the guest management. I've never done the cleaning. I had housekeepers in the area that helped me with my long-term rentals, so I kind of just brought them over. And I did handle the messaging for a little while, but then I outsourced that as well. So I had a third-party company that was helping me with all the guest management, and then I had professional housekeepers doing all the housekeeping.
Okay.
So,
Is it, just to kind of walk everybody through the cost for that, is it expensive to have somebody taking care of your reservation systems?
So it depends. There's a number of different ways to do it. At that time, I was paying a percentage for that company, a percentage of revenues. And so that can add up, of course, the more properties you add. But the cool thing with short-term rentals is we can make 3, 4, 5 times the amount of long-term rents. So we have extra money to pay for a lot of these expenses.
Sure.
and still be making more than we would have maybe with the long-term rentals. So I worked with that company for quite a long time, for several years. until I got to the point. Now I have my own in-house team, amazing receptionists, most of them are in the Philippines.
Okay.
And so we handle it all in-house now. So there's that route. There's the route of, hiring a third-party company, or there's the route of just finding a property manager that works with short-term rentals, or in the Airbnb world, a lot of people call them co-hosts, or Airbnb calls them co-hosts.
Gotcha.
And you can, it depends on the type of property you have, if it's a luxury vacation rental versus an inner city place, but anywhere between 15 and 40%, for management fees is
15 and 40. Woo.
Well, the lower percentages are going to be for smaller, like,
Yeah.
Urban type properties. But some of these luxury vacation rentals, especially if it's in an area that's been historically an area for vacation rentals, a lot of those property managers that have been there for a long time, they'll charge like, 40%. So there's a huge range. I use a ton of software tools, and
Right.
there's so many available now. They're adding new ones like all the time, but there is a lot of ways to automate all this, so you don't have to go that route of paying a really expensive property manager.
Yeah, I would think there's got to be somebody's built a software that you can really put in place, but I don't know that market. How do you find a good property manager? I hear property manager, and I know, coming from the environment real estate investor, and we've struggled with a good property management company in other states, and are finding good ones. Matter of fact, we bought properties because of a property management company, took advantage of the previous owner. How are you vetting out, or how can you suggest that somebody that's new to this can vet out a good manager or management company?
Yeah, it's a good question, and that it is hard to find good help.
Yeah, I would think
management can make or break it. There is, so in Airbnb, they have this option as a co-host. So you could go in your market or whatever you're thinking about acquiring a short-term rental, and you can find these co-hosts that are already listed on Airbnb that are already managing properties in that area. And you can simply look at their ratings and see how well they've been doing. Then you can contact them there. I think that's one of the easiest ways. And they're incentivized to do a good job because they're going to get a percentage of revenue, right? And so I think that's the easiest way. And there's some other websites I think that have popped up to help you find good co-hosts. But I think that's pretty much the easiest.
They just need to do their research. Because a bad property manager, you'll find that, they'll say, oh, this wasn't rented out, when in fact it was rented out, and they pocketed the money. And so, and that goes back to, now I know you're big enough, you don't have to be at your properties regularly, but a new investor, they need to go buy those properties pretty regularly. Wouldn't you agree? Just to make sure that everything is running the way it should be.
So, I don't know, the first Airbnbs I ever did, I lived in the city. And so I wouldn't say I was going by there very regularly. The nice thing about the short-term rental world is that we get feedback like immediately, right? True. So if something isn't right, we hear about it really quickly, and we can also fix it really quickly and make sure it doesn't happen again. So after my first couple short-term rentals, I didn't live near my properties, or I tried to separate myself as much as possible from the properties, so I could just kind of focus on getting new properties and not on the management. So I think it's definitely it's way more doable than it's ever been with all the tools we have available. Yeah. And the nice thing is, as Airbnbs have become more and more popular, there's more and more people managing them that want to get into that business. So you may even find some of the long-term property managers are now opening up to the idea of managing short-term too. Yeah. I think it can be, that management's got to be the key. So interview, folks. Make sure you find the right management. How did you find when you first started? See, I have so many questions, Tim. It's an interesting space to me because it's really, and I can see how people could do very, very well financially here with the right management, or doing it, themselves. How'd you find your first maintenance people? Or was that you? No, I had long-term rentals already in Sacramento where I started with short-term rentals. So I had people to help with the maintenance. And then when I started investing outside of Sacramento, yeah, it's pretty much trial and error with maintenance. Referrals, I always start with referrals. So the properties I acquired had long-term management, so started there or used their maintenance. But it's really come down to referrals.
Yeah, I'm sure same with cleaning crew, unless I doubt you were going in fluffing pillows, were you? Leaving the chocolates behind?
No, I skipped that part, but
yeah. All right. Well, how did you now let's talk about financing this stuff. Is there special financing out there, or do you just regular traditional financing work for you and what you're doing?
Because I acquired most of my properties with long-term tenants in there,
yeah,
I was able to get normal commercial loans. They were operating stabilized properties. Now, years down the road, as I'm refinancing some of these properties, different banks have different opinions on short-term rentals. Some are more open to it than others. I'm in the middle of several refinances right now, and they know that I have short-term rentals in there. I'm getting long-term fixed debt. So it just depends on the bank, but there are way more options than there used to be. And they're nationwide options too. They're nationwide lenders that will lend specifically for short-term rentals.
Okay, good. Because I just can imagine going out and sitting with a traditional lender and saying, yeah, I'm going to Airbnb these units out. Their head probably spun around. But that's always, I'm glad that they've expanded on it. Walk us through now. Rest methods is something that you do to help people become an investor in this, correct?
Yeah, it's really like, content that I produce so someone can do this themselves. I moved out of the US like several years ago, and I was managing all my properties abroad, and friends were asking, how are you doing all this, and so I started a podcast a couple years ago called Short-Term Rental Riches, and they're just short, brief episodes for someone looking to invest or that already has short-term rentals, how to operate them. And then I started teaching a little bit. So I've done some live events in Memphis. Flew back, and we actually just did one in July, and they're a lot of fun. So, we get a good group together and rent a hotel space. So it's a weekend, and then also got a tour bus, and we'll go through some of my actual properties like in operation.
Good.
So it was a lot of fun. It's been exciting seeing just, people getting started in the industry. It's really not as challenging as someone might think.
That's the thing. I think it's, we always tell our people, you've got to start, you've got to really just take that first step. And this was pretty intriguing the way you're doing it, and you're kind of living it. I mean, here you are, you've started investing. Now you're not even living in the US, you're living in your dream city and living life while you're still investing here in the US. And I kind of think that's what, that's why we invest, is to build that wealth, to build that passive income, and you're living it. So, I think if people really see that it can be done, or people like you that have been out there doing it and been highly successful doing it, I think it's a great way to start creating some wealth. And I wasn't sure about the financing, if they were still doing the traditional, but I'm glad to hear they're doing that. Well, Tim, thank you for coming on today. I think we gave everybody a lot of information here in a few minutes. And is there anything that you think I missed? Is there anything out there, a common question that you get that you think I could be asked?
I guess if we were just going to leave it with one thing, the biggest reason people are intimidated to get into short-term rentals is the management. But the thing is, if you're making 3, 4, 5 times the amount that you're making with your long-term rentals, you have plenty of extra cash to pay for really good management, and still be making more than you would. So for me, this was kind of just like, it just expedited the growth of my portfolio, because it was it kind of expedited things. So
and I do think you're exactly right. We're investors, so we're always looking for the best deal, right? Management is not something you really want to find the best deal on. Price wise, you want to find the best people, and I think that's the key to this whole thing. And so, well, Tim, thank you for coming on. I'm going to put Tim's information, contact information, and podcast down below, or actually your Rest Methods website down below. And I believe the podcast is on there as well. Make sure you tune into that, read his blogs. Thank you, Tim. I think this
Yeah.
was very powerful. And folks, thank you for tuning in today. If you haven't done so, please do subscribe, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks, Joe.